I pride myself on being self-determined. I came into high school with a metaphorical blindfold that I had to take off myself. I have wonderful parents that, tell me like education is key to success. Because in my opinion, it is. Immigrant parents, they push you into education. They're hard on that. But it's not the same if they don't know what you have to do to get that education. You don't have parents that are telling you, do your homework for like chemistry and I can help you if you don't know it. And having someone that's already navigated, high school, someone who knows that you have to have a certain GPA or that like keeps track of your power school. Having parents that, want to push you but don't have all the knowledge to get you there, you have to do it yourself. I've never taken an AP class, and I'm a senior now, and I know that's gonna affect my, like college applications. There's a lot that you come in to high school not knowing. I was put in an academic biology class. It was my sophomore year. I went to my counselor and I told her, can I get into an honors class? And she was like, yeah. And she put me in honors class. And then we were heading out for lunch. I get out my class and I see the other class coming. My class was full of white freshmen. The other class was full of sophomore minorities. It was crazy to see why did I have to go out of my way to get put into a class? I still don't know the answer to that question, but I know a big one for kids is that there's no representation in those classes for them. I've had times where I was like hit with debates that I didn't ask for. It's just like having the strength to like stand up for yourself in like a class like that, because if you come into a class and you're like the only person that is different, you're gonna feel uncomfortable. It's just little things like that can affect a student without them realizing. I've never had a Hispanic teacher. You don't see someone representing you, so you don't think you can do it. A big thing with also the teacher representation as a Hispanic is having someone that can update your parents and tell them, what's going on if you don't have, English-speaking parents. I had all these things in mind that I wanted to teach other kids that are coming into high school, because I wish there was a club like that for me when I was younger. What it turned out to be a session for parents to get educated on high school, on applications for college, on all these different things that they wouldn't know if there wasn't for that club. Even like for us, for me and my mom, because she came every like session, it opened eyes about, colleges and the application, process. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. Support the people who are looking for change. So support kids that are making clubs to change something. Support ideas that people have that maybe you're like, yeah, we can do that, but it's gonna like cause some controversy. I think supporting people's ideas and what they want to do to change, all these data points it's like a big thing that I would want like people to take out of this.
Good evening and welcome to this evening's Courageous Conversation. I am Angie Lee, the Executive Director of the Department of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for RISD. And a courageous conversation is exactly why we're here tonight. We are going to discuss learning loss or left behind, Uprooting Old and New Narratives Surrounding Hispanic Latinx Students. This is a courageous conversation, and again, it's meant to be just that, courageous. As we explore a topic that challenges us to think critically about our practices, our systems, our structures, and our pathways or roadblocks to success for all. Hopefully, you were able to hear the student's heart as she recounted her experiences and feelings of being left behind while trying to navigate her educational system. We are here this evening to discuss the many students in RISD, 38.8% of our students to be exact, who may share in Needy's feelings of being overwhelmed, not represented, and both her feelings of frustration and optimism while trying to rise to achieve her education and success goals. Please be sure to stay until the very end of the courageous conversation in order to sign in. That sign in will be made available at the conclusion of the session. This applies if you are a RISD staff member and you are wanting non-duty credit for the presentation tonight. So again, make sure you stay on with us until the conclusion of the session, and that sign-in sheet will be made available. Before we get started, let's just quickly go through some of the session agreements for this evening. We want to make sure that we are present and welcoming in this virtual environment. That includes in the chat. We're going to make sure that we remain very welcoming. We want to chat and share thoughts, share experiences, all of those great things, but let's do it in a manner that is still respectful of all. Tonight, we also want to agree that we're here to listen deeply and to learn. We can expect that there may be some discomfort in some of the conversation tonight. Discomfort is not always a bad thing, however. Sometimes discomfort challenges us to probe a little bit deeper into what has caused that discomfort for us in order to figure out how to navigate forward. So expect a little discomfort. Another agreement is when things get difficult, turn to wonder. Ask yourself, I wonder why she feels that way. I wonder what made him say that. Why did this teacher post this, I wonder, in the chat? So when things get difficult, turn to wonder. Expect and accept non-closure. We are not going to solve the world's problems tonight, so accept non-closure. But this conversation does move us a little closer to understanding. And then lastly, manage your impact. Manage your impact. Again, we're in a virtual space, but manage your impact on the virtual space, particularly in the chat. We do have a panel lined up for you tonight for this courageous conversation, and I'd like to introduce you to our panel moderator for the evening. Mrs. Carolina Armstrong is our Director of Bilingual Services for Richardson ISD, and she is gracious enough to join us tonight and to moderate the questions in this discussion around learning loss or left behind. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Carolina, who will introduce us to tonight's guest.
Thank you, Angie. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us today as part of our the celebration in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. We have, I think, I mean, in such a lucky position to introduce you to our panelists tonight. We have two wonderful representatives of what education can do for us, and they are great advocates for us, for our students, and they are really leading the pathway. I have to say that both of them have truly inspired my own journey, and some of you, without even knowing, one of them has actually set the pathway for our own district. So in first place, we have Dr. Patsy Robles Goodwin, and she is a professor and director of BSL and bilingual programs for Texas Western University. But I would like to add, and I'm sure she's going to mention this to all of us, but she was the very first bilingual teacher hired in Richardson ISD several years ago. Our paths crossed when I was pursuing my master's in bilingual education, and she was my first professor. And I could never forget some of the stories that she shared with all of us in class, and we've been fortunate to stay, I've been fortunate to stay connected with her, and I'm so grateful for her agreeing to participate and engage with us this evening. And also we have Dr. Xochitl Rocha, and Dr. Rocha is joining us from Austin right now. She is the dual language coordinator and as part of the English Learners Services in the TA Office of Special Populations and Monitors. So I know that's a mouthful for me right now, but she is leading tremendous work and transformational work with for our students in terms of programming. We had the opportunity of connecting throughout the past year through the Dual Language Initiative, and she has so much to share with all of us, and I'm really glad also that she was able to make some time out of her super busy agenda to spend with this particular group for the Courageous Conversations. So please help me welcoming them. Any reactions that you can share with me, and let's get started. So I know that I introduced both of them, but I would love for each one of you to say hello to the group and tell us a little bit about yourselves, your journey, and how do you really connect with our Courageous Conversations today and your own experience. I seeing both of you, I haven't seen you in a while. As you can see, I'm still working from, well, not working from home. I'm recovering from surgery right now, but I'm really, really excited to see both of you, and I'm sending you a virtual hug. Start with you, Dr. Rocha. I see you first on my side, so you can say hi to the group.
Absolutely. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you. What an honor and a privilege to be sitting among great individuals wanting to share, ideas and talking about, like you mentioned, courageous conversations that are much needed in order to support the educational system and our emergent bilinguals, specifically students of color, Latinos, Hispanic, that are in our school systems and are in dire need of our support in order for them to really, support the cultural and linguistic assets that they bring into our school system. Es un honor y un placer.
Dr. Robles Goodwin.
Yes, un buen saludo to everybody. It is an honor to be here. In a way, I feel like I'm coming home. Richardson ISD really holds a special place in my heart. Just like Carolina said, it was my first teaching position, and I just learned so much as a professional while I was in Richardson, and met some incredible teachers and administrators that shaped my journey in education, and I'm forever grateful. So I appreciate being invited to be part of this panel. We are at a different point now, and again, I would be remiss if I did not just share my gratitude for Richardson ISD for giving me that first opportunity to impact students' lives and the lives of their parents. So thank you very much, Carolina, for inviting me to be part of this panel this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you to both of you. And now our teams on our district and everybody that is in attendance today can know why you are here joining us today for this particular conversation. So I'm going to start with directing a couple of questions, to you, but feel free to jump in. And towards the end, as Angie mentioned, we will have an opportunity to perhaps take some questions from those who are in attendance. I know that everybody's really excited to have you both here. So the first question is for you, Dr. Rocha. What would you like to share with the audience this evening about who you are, what is your narrative, and why you believe the conversation is so important?
Well, let me start off by saying also thank you for the opportunity. What a beautiful video. A lot of that young lady's story kind of resonated with my own. So as you can see, my name is Xochitl Anabel Rocha. It is an Aztec name. And growing up was not something that I was happy, owning, and of course the color of my skin. So what brings me here today, as an educator, I never in a million years did I think that I was going to become an educator, because like that young lady, I felt that the school system, right, growing up as a migrant worker, an English learner, emergent bilingual in a school system that only encouraged me or supported my English development that I did not have, because my first language was Spanish, and that's the only language that I knew from home and bringing in. And being a migrant worker, right, from Texas, Iowa, Idaho, California, and Iowa, let me tell you, it was not easy. So my experiences, I had great experiences. I'm not going to negate the fact that I had great teachers within my pathway, but I also had very unfortunate experiences that really, that were traumatic for me. So it starts with identity. It starts with understanding who I was. And at a very young age, being the language broker for my parents was not something that I thought that a young little girl needed to do, right? And having other responsibilities at home, and then school was not easy. So I say this because it is important to really understand the assets that our students bring into the classroom, right, culturally and linguistically. And it took me until I became an adult to really understand and value who I really was, and the embrace my culture, my language, my identity, and really understanding that this was, there were assets to contribute to my school, to my community, to my state, and to my nation as a whole. So I was very fortunate enough to meet great people also along the pathway. And yes, it is true that one of the things that my parents kind of instilled was the importance of education, of an education. But one thing that they were sure of was that I could not lose my Spanish. One, because I didn't speak English, so I needed to speak the language that they understood, but also the importance of communication with my own grandparents, right? My relatives, my nephews, my nieces, etc. So it was important for me to continue the language, and I appreciate that now, right? But at many times I was lost in school. I didn't think that I belonged in either way. So getting into education, I was a marketing representative, helping families. So for the past more than 20 years, I've been working with low-income minority families and emergent bilingual families and bridging higher education to college, right? And the importance then, at one time, one parent was the one who kind of swayed me into becoming an educator. And I became, I fell in love with education. And ever since, I love supporting the assets that our students bring in. And I am a first-generation college graduate, bachelor's, master's, and happy to say that I have a doctorate. But that has really pushed me to that next level in supporting. I've had different roles in an educational setting to really promote the importance of elevating diversity and elevating the emergent bilingual families and all the contributions that they bring into our school systems as an educator, as an administrator from a campus, as a supporting K through 12 education at the Region Center, at an urban district, at a rural area, and now at the agency. So one of my biggest pieces is equity, right? And really, really understanding the word of equity and elevating that as much as I can by supporting the elevation of language, culture, and identity into our school system. So why is this important to me? Because it's, for many years, bilingual education has been, in conversation. But I think it's time that we also kind of bring in our families and really embrace them into building awareness and having them become the #1 advocates for their students.
Thank you so much. Wow. Dr. Roberts Goodwin, I'm going to ask the same question to you, but perhaps with a little tweak. So what could you share about, yourself? I hold one of your stories dear into my heart about your dad driving to school when he was a first grader. That's been something that's it's still in my heart, and every chance that I had to share that story with others, I'll share it. But I know that that's yours, and I'm sure that you have plenty more. So something about your narrative, and what's the need to highlight Hispanic and Latinx Heritage Month, honoring our past and our current history?
Okay, so Carolina, again, just like Dr. Rocha mentioned, we are in a time where we need to have these courageous conversations. I'm reading a book, and one of the quotes was that few problems are ever solved by ignoring them. And so, this is a great opportunity. Just like you mentioned, I come from a loving family. My father was a migrant from Mexico, and the family would move around and work in the fields. And so we come from a background of really working hard, loving parents. My mother understood that education was going to be a key factor in our lives. And I tell the story that I felt very supported from the home, but just like the video illustrated, because they weren't given those opportunities to go to school, it was really hard for them to support us in terms of what I would say other parents might do, from knowing about being in the right courses and what are going to be the courses to prepare you for college. Those were all areas that our parents entrusted educational personnel to do what needed to be done. And unfortunately for a lot of us, I tell my students, I say, I play piano, but I can type about 60 to 80 words a minute because my counselors had me in typing 1, typing 2, typing 3, shorthand. Because I was supposed to graduate and become an administrative assistant. And so I was not placed in these AP classes, just like the video alluded to. And so, going to college was a really big challenge for me because I felt like I really wasn't prepared. I was growing up in a time where, unfortunately, the color of your skin dictated your future. And so, again, very loving individuals, but that was their perception of our future. And so I got to college from having a high school business teacher that was my business teacher that had a dean. Her husband was an associate dean, and she called me up in the summer and said, well, how are your plans going to college? And I said, well, I know I'm going. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to pay for it. And I'm not really sure, what courses. And she said, you know what, go talk to my husband. I've already told him about you. And so she paved that way. And so I had mentors in the School of Education that really paved the way. And that's one of the reasons why I am really now just a big advocate for mentors helping students, helping teachers, helping parents navigate a system that was sometimes not navigated for us, or that it was, and that we're taking it a step further. So, my story is about loving families that give their everything to have their students come to school. And we should expect to give them a quality education with the same high expectations for achievement for all our students. So again, just like Dr. Rocha, my parents were very loving and cultural, and they really, couldn't help us with our schoolwork. But, I could never understand as a professional, once I started teaching, why the schools would label our children as at risk. And I would think, what are they at risk for? They're bringing something valuable that's treasured in other countries. They're bringing another language, and they're bringing a richness of diversity that should come in to enhance what we already have, not to be a threat. And so my whole educational, I guess goal has been to bridge some of those gaps of understanding, that we sit down and we talk and we problem solve, and that we address some of those issues in the best ways that we can, knowing that history in the past, things happened the way they did. But we have an opportunity now to really make a change for the positive, and to expect that all our students can achieve today.
Gosh, that is so important. I know that we've had several conversations, at all different levels, and really changing that narrative for our students and for our families, and moving from this deficit into embracing the richness and everything that they bring to the table and through the doors of our schools. And we know too that the last almost couple of years has been incredibly challenging, not only for us as an educational system trying to figure out, but also for our families, that on top of facing the in and outs of the school system that might be quite foreign to them, they also had to cope with a pandemic and really try to figure out how to understand. So I'm also curious, Dr. Rocha, how, knowing about, learning about you and your family, and how have you been impacted by the pandemic? Is that something that is also part of your, in and out, like going into work every day, knowing that it's also affecting you, part of the lens that you have for the work that you are doing?
So thank you for that question. Because oftentimes we tend to kind of, in our job streams, right, we tend to focus on who we're serving. But I think that the pandemic has really impacted every single one, every family, every home, every educational system. But how has it impacted me as an educator and as a parent? I am a parent of 5, and in working full time, right, and having and my responsibility as an educator at the time was really supporting at a district level. So having to be there almost 24/7 to pivot quickly to be able to support educators. So we're going to be, having to restructure their way of teaching was difficult, right? Because I had not only to be mentally and physically prepared to be able to support myself, right, through this pandemic, through this crazy time, but also supporting those that I served in education and then my own kiddos. So funny that you say how it has impacted me, right? I don't know if you've heard the saying in Spanish, but I'm going to say it in English, right? A good carpenter doesn't have good carpentry at home. A good auto mechanic doesn't have a running car. Well, guess what? I felt like that as an educator, right? That I was preparing lessons and creating curriculum specifically for synchronous and synchronous writing. There's someone at the door. So that was another thing, another challenge. But creating a synchronous and synchronous curriculum they kind of encourage their students to continue oral language development at home, right? Continue the process of normalcy as best as we can at the classroom with the work that was assigned at home. So I say this because in working with the asynchronous curriculum, the one thing that we're really wanting to engage students is ask an adult, tell them what you thought, tell them what you understood from the story, have this conversation with them to keep the learning process going. An adult or at home. And guess who was at home? I was the adult at home. And at times I wasn't able to meet the demands of my own children to be able to continue working. And of course, my husband was an essential worker, so he wasn't at home. So having to think about, the possibility or higher chances of bringing that to the house. So it's very difficult. So being that as an educator, now I'm going to speak as a supporting families, right? It also made me become more aware, right? Become that strong individual to say, well, if this is what you're feeling, can you imagine our emergent bilingual families, right? How are they feeling now? That some of them, yes, not only did we lose loved ones, but we lost jobs, right? It really changed the way we saw ourselves, life, health, and everything as a whole. So how can we really tap into their needs to be able to kind of knowingly that historically we have that marginalized and systems of inequities, right? That really gave us another lens to look at, this is what we need for our emergent bilinguals. So what do we need to do quickly to be able to support them, right? So I guess a lot of the times in this particular setting, it also kind of gave us that opportunity to really value our families, right? Because they became the educators at home. And some of them did a very good job, right? Because who knows their children better than them, right? So I think that being mindful of all of that gave me a lot of thinking, a lot of the mental preparation that I needed to fulfill my job and my responsibilities as an educator, but also as a family, and also, as a mother and as a family as a whole. It was devastating too, and I'm sure that all of you were impacted some way or another of not being able to say goodbye to loved ones, right? Or have a decent funeral, or just so much things going on emotionally for a lot of us. So I think that I had to be that strong pillar to be able to continue moving forward, especially education, right? We really want to make sure that education is equitable for all, is creating those stronger systems. So that really pushed me and drove me into wanting to do researching more and creating and developing stronger systems of support for our teachers that were at the trenches. And let me tell you, I believe there are heroes. There are number one heroes along with with families, because they took care of our students in that 1 year that they were at home. So, and I know I can keep on talking about it, but I think that, I have to be mindful that it not only affected me, but it affected all of us as a whole.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now that, it's really a dual role that you have, right? And I think our teachers also experience, something similar, trying to be there for our students, but also having to take care of themselves and their families, and experiencing so much through the year. And we're still experiencing some of those, I wouldn't say residual, but we're not out of it yet, and we're still trying to figure things out and coping and finding some of those coping mechanisms as well. And as you mentioned, there is a disproportionality, right? So Dr. Robles-Goodwin, having that disproportionate impact in our communities and understanding it, particularly in what Dr. Rocha mentioned as our Hispanic and our Latinx communities, how should we understand this reality, and what is the story, the history those numbers reveal, and what is the injustice telling us about racism? Where is it, how it exists? Especially through this pandemic, as and I know that through the slides there were some numbers shared, and I know that we all have seen the impact that the pandemic has had on our minorities. So could you share some of your insight regarding that particular topic? If I was not super clear, I probably could restate my question. So understanding the reality, what's that story, but also that there is a history in what those numbers reveal, and there is, we have to, even if we don't want to accept it, there is an injustice telling us about a history of racism and how this also prevailed and was really witnessed by all of us through this pandemic.
So, it's been said that these disparities have always existed, and the pandemic just allowed them to surface. And as I reflect on the effects of the pandemic, I think of my own situation, and I feel very lucky that I have an education and that I was able to keep my job during the pandemic, which allowed me to support my family. And you know, I have a high schooler, and he was at home virtually, and I was trying to also teach classes online virtually, and trying to keep him. And you know, there were some challenges there. Even though I'm an educator, there would be situations where I would be emailing, you know, the teacher, and I don't understand this process, or could you give me more information? And, you know, I told my husband, I said, I train teachers for a living, and I train them, you know, to really be aware of, you know, cultural nuances and so forth. And I can't even get through. And, you know, they would see that I had a doctorate, and you know, I was a professor, I'm a professional, and I still felt like weeks went by, I didn't get a response, or, you know, and all I kept thinking was, what would my experience be like if I didn't speak the language, if I didn't even know what questions to ask because I've never had those experiences. In other words, this experience allowed me just to kind of go back and really reflect on what many parents were experiencing at the time. And again, I was working with students who couldn't come to class, even if it was virtual, because they were taking care of siblings or an extended family member that had, you know, gotten sick, and things needed to be done. And, you know, I would talk to students who, you know, they used to work in the restaurant business, and now they had no jobs. And so they were being evicted and they were moving in. And so you had this small space of many people living and trying to survive by helping each other. So, I mean, I think that the pandemic was just an opportunity to really reflect on what my experience is allowing me to do, and my knowledge, and what happens to those families who don't have access to internet. That was a really big issue. Was the expectation is that everybody could just get on their computer. Well, you know, I can have a standard shift car that could be in my driveway because I don't drive standard shift. It wouldn't move. And it's like, okay, we gave the parents the technology, but they didn't know how to use them. Or there was one, then a child needed it. And, you know, and so there was just all kinds of issues that impeded the learning process. I think parents also understood and valued teachers as well as the general society, because it was a struggle to keep them engaged and to keep them on task all day while they tried to also keep working. So I think that the pandemic really just allowed us to peek in to some of the issues that we know are happening to our families, but they were highlighted and magnified to an extent where, you know, we need to probably going forward use those experiences to make meaningful change. In other words, what opportunities do we need to provide our parents in terms of the courses their children need to take? What about technology training? What if, you know, again, making sure that they have network accessibility. So again, I am very fortunate that I was able, it was very stressful, but just the fact that we were able to keep our jobs and keep going really says a lot for us in terms of our ability to do so, because many of our families, lost a lot, not only loved ones, but jobs and the opportunity of not getting a quality education due to just the problems and the challenges that this pandemic brought to us, not only in the industry, but especially to education.
Thank you so much. So now I'm going to turn to Dr. Rocha, and Dr. Robles will identify some of the barriers experienced by our community. So in your opinion, what would be the steps that we need to take to address the needs of our Hispanic, Latino community? And what are some ways that those that are not part of that community, that are not Hispanic, not Latino, can help to support those needs? So Dr. Robles, we're going to just mention a variety of things, and I think we were all nodding, right? We were able to see each one of those things day in and out in our schools. So now turning into the other side, what can we do as an organization, as individuals, and what our allies could do to support overcome some of those barriers?
Another great question. So I like the fact that you said we, right? What can we do? Not only us as educators, but also our allies. And I always think that our number one allies are our families, right? In our communities. So I think that in thinking of in terms of the pandemic, Dr. Robles Goodwin kind of nailed it in the head, right? It just, those inequities came more to light, right? We're able to kind of see them with a different lens, or perhaps even a better lens, right? They became more evident to us. But I think that one of the things to move into what are some of the steps to support Hispanic, Latino, Chicano, this community of learners is really empowering them, right? One of the things that I saw through the work stream was bilingual services, right? One of the reasons why Texas has bilingual education for our Spanish-speaking homes or other languages spoken at home other than English is to really provide access and development of their first language, right? We know that research has told us time after time that if we really cultivate literacy in their first language, that is the number one predictor of how they're going to attain and develop English proficiency, right? So we want the best for our students. And I think that the interruption of bilingual services due to the pandemic, the quick pivot, right? That's when we really understood the disparities between we knew as educators that lack of authentic resources to meet the cultural linguistic needs of our students. But when we went to all technology platforms, we realized that software resources didn't have the compatible resources that they were going to need, that they needed in order to be successful, right? And really bringing in the family into the picture is that we didn't have perhaps the language that they spoke at home to be able to support. Dr. Robles just mentioned right now herself as an educator, she needed to kind of refresh, right, some of these things to be able to support the child. And perhaps due to the extensive work of the educator, right? I always kind of err on the good side, is that perhaps they were so busy. I can just imagine, right, our families and how they felt when perhaps they even wrote an email, perhaps in their own language. And maybe that's the reason why they never got a response, or tapped into social media or some type of communication and relationship building with the school, right, to feel supported. So I think that those are some of the steps that we need to be very proactive, right? In the workstream in bilingual education, there's one word that is now kind of coined, right? It's social culture competence. And we're really taking it into the next level because it not only constitutes in the learning and processes of our students, right, to become socially aware, an appreciation of languages and cultures around them, and also validating their own to be able to validate those around them. It's also the adults. And it's really taking that additional step to build communities that understand that we're serving, even if we say the minority, it's actually a majority speaking language of Spanish in most of our communities that Latinos and Hispanics bring to our educational system, and its richness, right? And it's always thinking of that asset-based thinking of everything that they bring into the classroom, and where I can meet them linguistically and culturally so they can become successful. Kind of bouncing back to the beautiful video of saying, I didn't even know. I mean, I thought I was giving it all my best because that's what my parents kind of instilled in me. Education is key. Yet if we don't have individuals to kind of say equitable access to everything that the school has to offer for every student, then are we really making stronger systems to really tap into the needs of our students and helping our family members, right, aware of what's there that the schools can offer, right? And I think that bridging that connection between our families is really going to support those inequities, right? Are we going to get there tomorrow? I wish, but it takes a community, right? It takes us all to really reflect, to really be transformative and progressive into this new phase that we're going to be working towards to really support the learning with an equitable lens for our emergent bilinguals, specifically our students of color, Latinos, Hispanic students that we serve. So I just reiterate, I think it's that social culture competence, but building awareness with our families and communities.
Thank you so much. And I think that's, what really and truly resonated with me is that equal access to all, right? We are very focused today on our Hispanic community because of our conversations and, how dear this topic is to all of us, but it's truly about all of our students are not only, as you mentioned, it's a minority. We are truly a minority majority district today. And 37% of our population comes from a Hispanic Latino background, and 27% of our students in Richardson ISD today are emerging bilingual students, not only speakers of Spanish, but native speakers of so many other languages. 55 languages overall. It's a huge asset. But as we continue working towards that equity, I'm going to switch to Dr. Robles, and I'm going to read the question to make sure that I'm really truly honoring the spirit of it. So it's been 66 years since Brown versus Board of Education that helped establish the precedent that separate but equal education was not equal at all. Can you share with us how this inequity still prevails today and how schools are funded, its impact on students of color and students for low-income families?
Well, I had a mentor that said, equity does not mean equal. And I really thought about that. I think most of us think that we need to give everything at the same level to everybody, and that's equitable. Well, that's not really the case. We have to look at our students and really look at it from a cultural lens. Because we have to understand what their needs are, and they're different. We talk about, even the Latino, Hispanic, sometimes they lump us all into one, but we're very diverse. I take my students abroad and we go to Ecuador, we go to South America, or we'll go to Colombia, or we'll go to even to Spain. And they're all different. Yes, we speak Spanish, so our Spanish is different. We have different needs based on our community and our culture. So I think as school districts, we really need to individualize our needs by really understanding our students and their families and asking them, having conversations with them. Many times we presuppose many things, and really and we provide a service that they probably would have, preferred another type of service. I'm really big into parent education, and I'm fortunate enough to oversee a parent academy for 6 school districts. And this pandemic, it really had us thinking outside of the box, because we used to do it all in person, and now. With the pandemic, we had to continue to provide those services. And so, we changed to a virtual format. Well, that brought challenges in itself and was very difficult. But then once parents got accustomed to it, then they much prefer now that we have an opportunity to go back in person. They're like, you know what, I really like this. I said, well, tell us why you like it. Well, while I'm cooking dinner for my husband, I can still get online and participate. And you're thinking, well, okay, never really thought about that. Sometimes we have solutions, or we think we understand their problems or their issues, and try to provide solutions without really asking, what is it that you need, and how can we best provide those? So when you think about the inequities, well, it's not going to be equal, and it's going to be different. And it may even be different from one school to the next, from one district to another. But I just think we need to recognize that we can't provide the same medicine for all, for the same ailment and think it's going to work. And so I think if we've learned anything, is we need to be more cognizant of having the opportunity to really talk to the parents. And si se necesita hablar en español, pues vamos a tener alguien que hable español. We're going to have somebody that needs to provide a translation or provide it in Spanish, that we provide those services. When I was teaching in Richardson, nothing was ever translated. And I remember as a beginning teacher thinking, okay, when am I going to have time to translate this? It needs to go out today. And now we have, we have people that we hire to translate, but then do our parents even read? Are they literate? Would it be more, would it be better if we called them, if we make that connection? So I think, we have to learn to use our funds that we get and really cater to our needs, which may be very different. So yes, we still have inequities, not because sometimes we don't have the funding, but maybe they're not used like they should be, or we haven't asked them. I love to sit down to talk to parents. I mean, even when I did my dissertation, it was about, it was at the time where schools were saying, oh, we got parental input with this decision. And so that really resonated with me. I kept thinking, man, these school districts really are asking for parental input. So then I decided to ask parents, and the school says they made this decision and they asked for your input. Can you give me more information about that? And they go, no, nobody ever asked me anything. And so what I came to realize is that we need to walk the talk. If we really do want to provide an equitable education, that it needs to be individualized for the needs of our community. And we need to provide opportunities to ask for their input and bring in the community and really allow them to be welcome in our schools and to provide a place for them so that they feel like they're welcome. I had a parent one time, and I asked, do you feel welcome in this school? And her response was like, no, I don't. And it's like, oh, wow, because we had done lots to really try to make parents feel that like they were welcome at the school. And I said, well, tell me why. And she said, well, I hate that I have to wear this badge that says visitor. I'm not a visitor. I'm part of the school. I want a badge that says I am a parent of a student here. And it's like, well, we can do that. So it's those little things that if we could just ask the parents, we could garner their support by doing something that doesn't really cost a lot of money. It's just understanding what their needs are. So again, I think the inequities come from misunderstandings. It comes from, thinking that we know what the needs are and acting upon those before we really get the input from the stakeholders.
Thank you so much. And gosh, I think we've also heard that story before too, right? We're trying to involve our parents or trying to think through what we think or know or assume that is best for them, or what we want for them to do. I recently attended a webinar that mentioned or reflected upon the statement, like, we're always asking, are our students ready? Are they ready for college? Are they ready for school? Are they ready for pre-K? But the question should be, are we ready for them, right? Are we ready to serve them, to support them? And I would add, are we willing to do that? So I'm going to transition us a little bit and continue diving, through the COVID lens. I know that that's the topic of our conversation, and we still want to, reflect a little bit deeper into that. So my question is, can I go to you, Dr. Rocha? And it's, a statement. So public schools have been systemically underfunded. Students, teachers, and their families have been evicted, as we've seen on the press, and family and community members are sick and dying. So is this learning loss of COVID slide a dangerous myth, or does it only obscure the real reasons why students are suffering through the pandemic? And I think it's a question that we continue to ponder, right? Is it really, is it just the pandemic surface these challenges and these issues, these chronic, these historical issues, or is it something that it's been there and now we're just, we are gonna be able to move through it?
I think it's tough, right, to get to one definite answer, but I think that we will get through this, but we can't do it alone, right? It takes all of us to champion this pandemic and slowly start learning, right? And really transforming the way we think and we approach things. This, that we hear about learning loss, specifically in our students, and especially on, our emergent bilingual students and their families. I think it really has. This pandemic has hurt us in all different directions, not only cognitively, but linguistically, emotionally, and socially. I mean, it really has taken us into a different hole and roller coaster of emotions. But I really think that, to be fair, right, there was, and I think I shared that with Mr. Jeremy last time I spoke to him, in regards to, we can associate, right, and think about how we can support, now that we're face to face and in brick and mortar settings, schools for our students, how can we close that learning loss, or how can we approach that? We have to be aware, like I think Dr. Robles kind of alluded to, we have to be cognizant, right, that there are some things that were hindered. How can we support, and the way we approach it is going to really make a difference in the way we're really going to heal as a state and as a nation, right? And by I mean healing is in, again, all different aspects, socially, emotionally, mentally, linguistically, and cognitively, right? But we really need to give grace to our families, right? Because we can't really say there was a complete loss within that year, right? Because we do have those overly generalized families that you all kind of talked about, that we typically say, the emergent bilingual families, they don't want to, they don't come, they don't do this, et cetera, et cetera. And we can, the list goes on. But in reality, right, there's a lot of funds of knowledge that occurred during the pandemic as well, because we needed to pivot, right? I think it was mentioned before, students needed to kind of either find a job to support and make ends meet to help their families, right? Or their families had to get additional jobs. So the older sibling had to be the caregiver of the young ones, and they became the teacher, right, for those young ones as well. Had to, the gardening and a lot of time spent at home and in the houses, right? There's other things that they were able to learn, and they were able to kind of associate and bridge whatever their parents, their talents, or their gifts. I think there was still some type of learning going on at home, and that social linguistic piece also, right, kind of was developed. And we know that is an integral key for linguistic and academic language development as well. So I think that as a state, and we really need to kind of come together, support our emergent bilinguals. And I think that one of the things that I mentioned before is that continuity of bilingual services. And you're right, just because we have resources in Spanish, they may be equal, but it's not equity when it's not authentic to their language, right? And really validating the linguistic repertoires that they bring it into the classroom to really start building. So I think it's the way that we're going to change that is the way we think. And it's not something new, right? Because we've heard acceleration, we've heard enrichment, we've heard cooperative learning, we've heard student-centered activities, but now is a time to really employ them, to really give our students the opportunity to navigate the space of new learning and to really kind of bring in what, you know, we say was lost, but giving them those authentic opportunities to, you know, really dive deep into those standards that they're going to be required. Because at the end of the day, and I know that, you know, you might ask in regards to assessment, right? That's integral and that's important, because at the end of the day, it's a child that needs to really demonstrate what they have learned. So I think that, yes, we did have some type of learning loss, but we all did to a certain extent, right? Because of the fact of the pandemic. But can we revitalize? Can we heal? We will do it slowly, but we need to be very intentional and targeted to meeting the students where they're at, to be able to provide that authentic and targeted instruction to reform.
Thank you. And I really love what you said about reframing our words and our mindset, right? So really, you know, gives us the power of words, and that words matter, and really shifting some of those, you know, turning those losses into opportunities. However, there was one point that you mentioned regarding standardized tests and meeting those needs and getting to, you know, our students ready to that level of expectation. So I'm gonna switch to Dr. Goodwin. So education is often framed as a pass-fail logic. If you're not excelling, that you're failing, and those test scores can be a limited data collection. So standardized tests not only cause intense anxiety for our students and teachers, but they can disrupt learning even further. So how do you see this notion, the indicators of success, and recognizing obviously that, you know, we need those standardized tests that probably I'm going to speak out of words like a necessary evil, right? But how do we get past that and how do we even, you know, frame it for our students? A lot of our conversations been around our families, but when I think about our students and that test anxiety, in addition to so many other elements, and even for our teachers. I know that we have several teachers in the audience today, and testing season is no joke, right?
Well, you know, I've been in education for 37 years and I've seen it all. I remember seeing a teacher teach to the test. And did her students score well on standardized testing? Absolutely. I remember coming week after week after week to observe her, and she kept doing the same thing, which was good, but at the expense of teaching her students how to think and to think critically. So the system recognized her, and she received an award for attaining the passing score on standardized testing of her students. And I often wondered, what price did we pay for the passing score of those students? They learned how to take a test, but did we really teach them how to think for a lifetime? And so I think as educators, we get caught in this system of accountability, and we really are not addressing the issue of accelerating learning to a point where we are too focused on these scores. Now, again, I've been in education long enough. I've been a teacher and administrator in higher ed. I remember being a school administrator, and the state, TEA, recognized that we were testing students who were not ready for testing, and we could exempt them. So I remember my school principals going, wait a minute, can we exempt our ELs and the state was allowing that because we didn't want to, put them in a position where they felt bad because they didn't understand. Well, guess what happened to the learning? Those teachers ignored our ELs because they didn't count and started, really directing their efforts to the students that were going to count and take a test. I would walk into classrooms where ELs were playing, they were doing worksheets, they weren't learning because they were exempt. They weren't going to take the test. And so, this went on for a while, and I kept thinking, this is not good. We've gone from one extreme to another, and now there's no accountability, and the teachers are not teaching, or they're ignoring these kids. And all I kept thinking was, there's no time to waste. There's no time to waste. Here we had the parents of these students who, through great sacrifice, really depended on the school system to teach their kids, not just English, but to teach them in all learning. And if they could have seen what I saw from my perspective, they were sending these students to school without them really learning. So again, in my experience in education, I've seen it all. And I'm in the business of training teachers. And, I talk about, explicit instruction. We have to be intentional about teaching kids how to think, and not just for a test, but for a lifetime, and to apply those skills. And so, yes, it does seem like the system is based on, you pass or you don't pass, or your kids didn't make the progress that they're supposed to. And so I always challenge my teachers, when you are, given that kind of reasoning that your kids didn't make sufficient enough progress, really challenge them and look at the data, because it may have been that they weren't on grade level to begin with. They were so behind that the progress that they did make was a lot. It just wasn't enough because they were so far behind. And I think teachers need to hear that their efforts count, that they did help students succeed. It wasn't enough to get them to pass these tests, but that they need to be proud of the fact that they brought them from this point to this point, and really look at how much progress they made. Do we still have a lot of work to do? Absolutely. We not only need to teach, what needs to be taught, we need to do it in a way that's active learning, that kids will remember it and will use it, and all the best practices that we know from research. So when I hear that rhetoric, I've seen the pendulum go from one extreme to the other, and I've seen both perspectives. I've seen what it does to teachers and the pressure to teach the test. And then I've seen where there's no accountability, and we really need to be in a position where we are providing the best instruction for all our students and differentiating it in a way that's culturally responsive. And we can't teach it in the same way for all students and expect the same outcome.
Thank you so much. I see some comments in the chat regarding, our standardized assessments, and we know that that is, part of our reality. That, as you said, if there is no accountability, it's very difficult. Not every individual, not every educator is on the same level on the spectrum on their understanding and how to support their students. So we know that that's a long conversation. That is probably something that is not even, we can talk about that all day long, in and out, but it's a different level and sphere of influence, and perhaps some of those conversations that legislature will have at some point. But we also know that it's federal, right? There is that balance in measuring what our students are learning. Perhaps ideally identifying ways in which it's not going to be detrimental to their learning and even to what the work that our teachers are doing. So continuing with this idea of what can we do to respond to the pandemic, as a school, as a district. And I'm gonna open the question to both of you. What do you think, as districts are reimagining? We have discussed, some of those challenges, some of those barriers, and we've also have identified, both of you have provided incredible insight into ways in which you have experienced, the pandemic, and you have experienced learning and supporting your own families and your own settings. So as a district, what can we do reimagining this life post-COVID? I'm thinking post-COVID, we're almost there. I want to be almost there. And how do we engage our parents, our community, so we don't continue perpetuating some of these inequities and disparities that in our children that you both have identified?
Well, the things, I'll start off, in my long experience, it's always been them and those, or, there's always this division. And, my goal has been, we're in this together. It's not you against me or, Brown versus, whatever. These are our kids. I used to have a professor that used to say, your students, and she would point at me and she was complaining. And I'd say, our students, and she'd go, your students. And I'd say, our students, because they're not mine. They're all of us. And we need to be responsible for all our students and to provide the best instruction, again, in a way that meets their needs. And we need to start working together. When I was a school administrator, my area covered pre-K through 12th grade, bilingual ESL. Found myself I'd come home and I was totally exhausted because I was in the elementary science meeting and I was in the high school math team. And it seemed as though I was in meetings all day long, even though they had one person overseeing, math at the elementary, one person seeing math at the high school. They had me, and I remember I would be exhausted and I'd ask myself, why am I doing this? And my response was, if I'm not visible, if I'm not there, we'll get left behind. They won't, if I'm not there, they won't say, oh, how does this initiative affect the bilingual and the ESL students? And so, I think my recommendation in moving forward is you can't operate from being separate. This is an issue that affects everyone. Why are we so separate? We need to come together. And I know that one of my goals as a professional was to have these conversations together. And even in higher education, it was all, oh, the bilingual education students this. And I'd say, no, they're not mine. And they're our students in our school. And I guess I would say all our students are your students in your school. So what can you do to move forward is to really have these conversations together so that you can understand the perspective of each other. When I was teaching in Richardson, we used to have a bilingual wing, and many times we were isolated. People didn't even understand our issues because we weren't a part of the whole, school. And so I think our mindset has been set that way. Education has a way of separating all these groups. And I think that this is the timing. COVID didn't just affect, one group of people. It affected all of us, and we all had to come together. So moving forward, let's come together and work together for solutions and not separate and do things in isolation with really and not understand the journey going forward. So I guess that's what I would recommend. Is it easy? No, it's not easy. And again, if I was not at those meetings, out of sight, out of mind, I wouldn't get funding, or I wouldn't get some consideration. And really, we need to be present and working together. So that would be my recommendation, Carolina, from a very simplistic, but almost, but a very difficult task.
Thank you. Dr.
And
Rocha.
Yes, and if I may, thank you. And I think you're right. I think that we all need to come together post-pandemic. I think there's a lot of things that we learned from it as well, that we know that we cannot go back to our normal pace, right? We know that we need to make those strong pivots that are going to support every single one of our children learning in our school system, whether it be private, charter, or public school settings, right? At the higher education level as well. I think one of the biggest things that I would say is that, for many years, researchers have said, right, in education, we need to triangulate what does research say, right, is best practice to serve students. What does policy say in regards to the law in Texas to be able to comply, to meet the linguistic, cognitive, and academic needs of our students? And then also, practice, what instructional strong practices are we really targeting in our classrooms to really enrich the lives of our students. So I really think that post-pandemic, we really need to be cognizant of what we have learned moving forward, strengthen those, be very progressive thinking, right? And be able to support, and I'm sorry, I think I'm lagging in my internet, to really support our future educators. I think that one of the things that Dr. Robles kind of said right now, dear to my heart. I also had the opportunity of being an adjunct professor at UT RGV and Texas A&M Kingsville. And that's the number one thing I always told our teachers, right, our future teachers, bilingual teachers, is that take pride in what you do, because not only are you teaching math, science, social studies, and language arts to build English proficiency, but you're teaching it in 2 languages to really linguistically support your students. So I think that moving forward, we cannot be an afterthought. None of our students can be an afterthought. They should be at the forefront of every curriculum planning. They should be at the forefront of teacher preparation and targeted PD for every single teacher. They should be at the forefront even when it comes to family engagement, right? And it's no longer involvement, engagement, but we're moving and shifting into empowerment, because we're really going to celebrate, what we learned that our parents can do to really support the educational system, right? Specifically for our Latino, Hispanic, and minority students, right? Or our typically marginalized communities. We really need to stand together and really support, again, research, practice, and policy. And we can't do this alone. We need every single stakeholder involved. And like you mentioned, Dr. Robles, I think one wise professor once told me, right, in order to impact or to make change happen, we need to represent, we need to be sitting at the table so that no one is left behind. Right. And I think that's something that we do as educators, but I think that everyone, every stakeholder, communities, families, administrators, campus administrators, district administrators, teachers, we can all come together to really shift and transform like I like to say, revolutionize the teaching of our students to really impact our communities and our state.
Thank you, Dr. Rocha. Gosh, I feel like a student right now. I'm just taking notes and just feeling so inspired by what you're sharing with us, and this, I wholeheartedly agree with each one of your statements, and I truly love what you said about taking pride in what we do. I know that I'm very self-centering, speaking, about our bilingual teachers and about their commitment and their dedication to our students, and their daily efforts they make supporting our students and our families navigate the system, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, throughout the pandemic, and I know that they do have that pride, and they are also advocating for our students, but also for themselves, and I'm proud to work alongside them to advocate for our program and the opportunities for our students. So as I'm trying to be very mindful of the clock, Jeremy and Angie, and I know there's lots of questions and things that we would like to ask, but as we come to our close, and we're getting closer to Angie closing us off, I just would like to ask you both again, what are some of the things that you are doing to restore and healing what's been lost or disrupted by the pandemic for you as individuals, as professionals? And it doesn't have to be super long, but if there is like one word that comes to mind as we are wrapping up, but also as you've taken us through this journey and you've helped us to learn a little bit more about you and your passion for this work and for the community that we represent.
Well, when I go work out, there's this big sign as I'm just dying in my workout, and it says, "Great things never come from the comfort zone." And I'm thinking, okay. But every day when I see that sign, I think about education. It's the same thing. I mean, great things never come from the comfort zone. These things are going to make us feel uncomfortable, but it's going to hopefully propel us to move forward. And I guess I would say, what am I doing? Well, we're having to train our teachers, our future teachers, very differently. I used to, we in research, we never really considered young children and stress. And then after 9/11, all the research was about, developmentally appropriate guidance for children during, traumatic times. And now we're at a point where we are now training our educators differently. We have to give them more tools with technology. We are moving forward with what has happened to a different place. And so I know that we do not view education the same way. We can't prepare them the way we used to. There's new understandings, there's new expectations. And so that lens has widened a little bit, but also the expectation that we need to involve our parents and our families into this educational realm so that we can work together, because we need to garner their support in order to move forward. So again, in moving forward, we have to think differently. If parents don't come to us, we need to come to them. And that's why with the parent academies that we have, we're now doing lots of things virtually. Do we have to train the parents? Absolutely. So there's a little bit of a time there where you have to retrain, but we can't go back to where we were. We need to take what we learn and move forward in a positive way. And maybe we need to reframe, but I know that from what I'm doing and the research, we're having teachers trained a little bit differently, and really hoping that when they're in the field and something else happens, that they'll be prepared and willing and open to be flexible to change, because we don't know what the future holds.
And I'm just going to say, I will continue and have been continue to be a supporter, right? I've learned how to listen even more, right? To be able to support and meet them, whether it is an educator, a student, a family member, or my own families, right? To be just being there to support, an anchor of support, and of course, being resilient, because this is not something that is going to break us. We are, in education, we're champions, right? We know how to champion adversities and challenges. And I think that this has been a phase in our lives to demonstrate what we can do in education to really build the momentum and produce, hopefully, our student outcomes for those that we serve.
Thank you so much. I'm a little bit nervous looking at the time, Angie. I told you that we talk a lot, but I see some hands raised as well. Just want to make sure that we have time to properly connect with our audience and close our session. I was telling Angie you're muted, and I was muted too.
And I thought I had unmuted myself, but I think instead of really spending time on the audience reflection, we do want to show it, and we've put it up. And what I want to challenge our participants tonight to do is really look at the reflection and really walk away thinking about, in order to live up to the district vision, and this is our RISD district vision, that all students will connect, learn, grow, and succeed. What's needed for our district systems to become student ready and family ready for the Hispanic families and communities we serve. And so I want to challenge you all to just really start to think about some of that. I want to tell our guests, listen, I have sticky notes all over my desk. I am a sticky note person. And so there are so many things that you all said tonight that are just going to become personal affirmations for me, because we're navigating a challenging time where we are really trying to employ the ideas of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we have programming and initiatives that are rolling out. And as you both know very well, that doesn't come without a cost or come without pushback. And so many things that you all said tonight just resonate with me. For example, Dr. Rocha, embracing identity is important. And we continue to say that, and we continue to message it, and we're creating curriculum with opportunities for students to do just that. And so thank you for sharing that tonight, because I needed to hear someone else say it. I know it, but I needed to hear someone else say it. And Dr. Robles Goodwin, thank you for saying that. You know, we can teach to a test, but are we teaching them to think for a lifetime? And as we continue to talk about amid conversations about, you know, just teach students to read and write and do arithmetic. And as we continue to say, but we have to develop the whole child, and we have to teach children to think critically, not just for the time they're with us, but for the time that's to come when they leave our educational system. So thank you for empowering us tonight with that. And the last thing that I just want to make note of, and I promise I see a raised hand, and I want to give a little space, and if you will allow us, Dr. Goodwin and Dr. Rocha, just a few minutes for that participant to ask the question. But I want to leave you all with what is just on my heart right now to repeat that our guests shared. One is, few problems are ever solved by ignoring them. And I think it is, as educators, we become complacent and we start to just ignore things, or we close our door and we do what we want to do and start to act, you know, as an island to ourselves, but we're still ignoring the problem, right? And so I love that you referenced something that you're reading, Dr. Goodwin, when you said few problems are ever solved by ignoring them. And that's why we're having this courageous conversation tonight, because we want to stop ignoring the problems. We have to start having and engaging in these conversations. And then the big one, I think this is for me personally too, so professionally and personally, great things never come from the comfort zone. Like, wow. You know, and when we talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, it tends to make a lot of us uncomfortable. We experience a lot of discomfort around these conversations, but thank you for reminding us that great things never come from the comfort zone. And with that, I think I know for sure I see one hand, and that's Linda. And Linda, if you want to just tap in quickly and make your comment or ask your question, we'll take it. And then we'll go ahead and wrap up. And I want to remind you all that Jeremy has posted the sign-in sheet. So if you are here and you need to receive credit, Jeremy has posted that link. So make sure you go ahead and do that. And then it is 6:16, so you're free to go. But while everyone is doing that, Linda, if you want to unmute and ask your question or make your comment, we are happy to receive it. I think we may have lost Linda. Or if she's like me, she just forgot. I'm forgetting a lot lately and having to work hard to really remember. But Linda, while we're still on and while people are signing in, if you remember your question, again, feel free to pop in and ask it. But for those of you still remaining, please sign in and then you are free to go. Again, we cannot thank you enough for joining us tonight. This was fantastic. Again, my desk is littered with sticky notes that I am going to turn into my personal affirmations. I need to read these every single morning to even motivate myself to stay in the fight, and that this is good work. It's necessary work.
Hi, this is Linda. I accidentally hit the hand. I don't have a question.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for sharing and popping in and letting us know that.
You're welcome.
It's great work. And so many who were on the call tonight, I think, are going to go back into their classrooms, into their offices tomorrow with a lot of what you shared with us on their minds and in their hearts. And so thank you for that. And with that, again, we are ready to end the session. So we'll stay on just a couple of more minutes for those of you who are still trying to sign in.